Good afternoon. So she did the easy part for me, thanks Tam, about asking people if they know about 826. So that people know we're a network of creative writing and after-school tutoring centers located in 8 cities in the United States. And we started here in the Bay Area as the Pirate Supply Store. But before we go into 826, I wanted to, I labeled this talk, and it was part of something I talk about, and then I realized one of my staff people said, that sounds like something from The Matrix. Isn't that there is no spoon? I was like, there is no box. So we'll get to that. But before we get to that, I wanted to get to little Gerald. And I wanted to talk just a bit about my background and where I grew up. I grew up in Harlem in the 70s and 80s, which was not probably what it is now, was not what it is then. Very dangerous neighborhood. I, as a kid, had no concept of that being dangerous. It was my neighborhood. It was fun. Yeah, it was kind of crazy, but it was great. My grandmother, on the other hand, knew that it was the worst place to raise a child. So she kept me in the house a lot. I spent a lot of time at home watching science fiction, Space 1999 and Star Trek and all those shows, if anyone remembers those. I also started collecting comic books. And so I've been collecting comic books now. I started then, I was about 10. So that's a long time of collecting comic books. I still collect comic books from my neighborhood comic book store. But it was really, to me, the comic books and the science fiction allowed me to escape and create my own world. And I started writing, and it was one of those things of, like, I really loved writing. It was my favorite thing to do. I did a lot of stories about science fiction, somewhat about the neighborhood, but more of this idea of creativity and creating. And so at about age 14, I boldly went to my grandmother. I gave her one of the first long-form short stories I ever wrote, called The Lightning Kid, about a kid who gets struck by lightning and becomes a superhero. And then goes crazy, but that's a whole different story. And she looks at it and she reads it. You're expecting at the time, your parents are gonna go, this is great. My grandmother looks at it and she reads it and said, that's nice. You're never gonna make any money. So I was like, oh, I was like, well, I really wanna be a writer. She's like, yeah, and I tell a story, my grandmother smoked a lot. So imagine this amazing African-American woman sitting there, you're never gonna make any money. So I scrapped the idea of being a writer and went and decided I got my first summer job that year at cleaning subway stations in New York City. Right? And I never looked back. I've been working ever since, and have really sort of backburnered the thought process of creativity for a long time. And it came out in different ways. I wound up being a film major in college, which she also laughed at until she saw the film and thought that wow, this is great. And then I went and I got an MFA at the Art Institute of Chicago and became a writer. But still, it's always been the creativity part, and that sort of box that we create for ourselves has always been there. And so for years, I worked in nonprofit, and then I encountered 826. And so 826 is this, our model is a blended model. So we've got storefronts in front of the tutoring center. And so the kids or the community has to come in through the storefront to get to the tutoring center. And this is our 826 NYC, which is a superhero supply store. Totally was like my favorite thing when I joined the organization. I'm like, comic books, superheroes, we do this. And so the theme of the store is an office depot for superheroes. So it sells cans of vengeance. We have a cape tester, the only cape tester in all of North America. But it allows to create this magical portal for the kids that come in to really think, they walk in and they're like, wow, what is this place? And they're on the cape tester and they're looking at the supplies and they're looking at secret identities. And there's a secret door here. And so no one knows about it but the kids. And so you walk in and it's this office depot. And then suddenly you see at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a group of 10-year-olds start to come in for after-school tutoring, and they creak open the secret door and they file in and they close it. And you see all the adults in the store turn around and go, where the hell did those kids go? They went here. So this is actually where the magic happens. So this is our tutoring center, and in the back, it is a space for kids. It's built for kids. It's built to make them feel comfortable. It's built to make them, this idea of how do you spark creativity? How do you get them excited about writing? So they come in, they'll work on for a while on their homework, and then they begin to write. And in all that time, they'll probably have volunteers who might be standing around in capes, who might be, pretending to be superheroes, but the kids are there, and as they're there, to really feel comfortable around this idea that writing can be joyous and education can be fun. So in this space, we try to cultivate this idea of creativity because we work under a couple sets of belief, but the first and foremost that we work under is that kids are weird. Kids are really strange. For those of you who have kids are really weird, right? Because their thought processes aren't linear. And they come up with amazing ideas. I have two nieces, and I visited them this past couple weeks ago. And the youngest one stops and looks at me and says, I don't mean to be immodest, but I won this award. I'm like, well, great. What's the award about? And in the same moment, she's like, I think we should paint your toenails again. Like, okay, that's great. So in this, they're weird, and so there's no box for them. We don't have to tell them to think outside of the box because there is no box. So they're always going to come up with amazing, fantastic, incredible ideas. And our goal is to help them with that, not to discourage them, but to really celebrate in that and to celebrate in that weirdness and to celebrate in that creativity. So we work with about 29,000 kids a year at our 8 centers across the country. We also work with, and we do that, and how we accomplish this mission is because we've got about 5,000 active volunteers. So these are grad students, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're retired teachers, people from the community who really care about what's going on and what's going on with their kids and want to come in and help. But it's not just about the helping aspect and volunteering. It's not a pity party. It's the volunteers come in, and then they get to be weird. And they get to be creative, and they get to have fun. So they work with the kids. This is from our 826 Seattle Center and 826 Seattle celebrates Pluto Day. And let's make Pluto a planet again. So, but you come in and the kids it's just this magical moment of when the kids and the volunteers are creating this amazing works and these amazing works of art and writing and working on videos. And so for us, it's not just about the writing, it's about the confidence that writing builds and the fun that can come with that confidence. So this is two of my new favorite books, The Ghosts and the Tuna Fish. Adults don't come up with stuff like that. And Balloons Bouncing on My Stomach. In one of our programs, we call a storytelling and bookmaking. And in storytelling and bookmaking, we bring kids to our centers. And so a class will come in, a class about 25 or 30 kids from public schools. We work primarily with under-resourced and low-income youth in the cities that we're in. The kids that don't have access to a creative writing program. So they will come in with a class, and they'll sit in the room, and the volunteers will be there. And they'll come, and they're thinking they're coming for just a regular, some sort of education thing. And they start talking about story and creating a plot, and suddenly, over a loudspeaker or from some hidden place, they hear Mr. Barnacle, who's the unseen publisher or editor of the books that we do. And he's screaming down the kids can't write, you can't create anything, and I'm gonna fire everybody that's down there. And this gets the kids really excited, because the kids are like, well, yeah, we can write, we can build a story. And so they sit there for 2 hours, and they work with the volunteers to create a story out of thin air. And you're not recycling anything. The first thing we tell them is there's no SpongeBob SquarePants allowed. Create something new. So you wind up with balloons bouncing on my stomach. Okay? And they do this all in a 2-hour period where they write the story, and then they get to create their own ending. So they go off and they write their own ending, and then we bind the books, put an author picture on, and the students in 2 hours become a published author. And they get to take it home. And I've met kids who still come to our program who that book is still in their house that they did when they were 10. So it's that unbridled creation going on in this space that we think is the most important part of what we do. But I think it's a part of how you get the volunteers engaged. Because, when I say that there is no box, I look at myself, I think for a long time, I lived in this sort of box where I had to work. And I always had to work, and I always had to make money, and I kept hearing my grandmother's voice in the back of my head. She passed away about 20 years ago. This thing about, you never make any money. I didn't say it the way she did, but, if I had cigarettes. And it's always in the back of my head. But at the same time, I thought, especially once I got to 826, about the ability to do something totally different and to be different. And that's okay. That box is only the creation of my own mind. So how do we break out of the box? And I think we allow the kids to celebrate and to work in that idea that there is no box. And then we allow the volunteers to live and work in that same reality. Because really, there is no box. We can do whatever we want to. Our lives are what we make of them. And so if we can teach our kids, especially kids who don't have the opportunity and kids who live in neighborhoods where sometimes they never leave that 5 to 10 block radius. I was destined at a time to have never left the 10 block radius I grew up in Harlem. When I turned 27, I actually had a party because the statistics when I was that age was that I wasn't supposed to be alive or I was supposed to be in jail. So it's important to me as I look at the kids that we work with who looks like me, how do we provide those opportunities and how do we provide that unbridled passion for them to learn and to live? And so one of the things I wanted to impart upon everyone was that if you have the opportunity, the fact that there's no box, what's the box in your life? And how do you break out of that box? And for those of you who are amazingly lucky enough to have kids and young kids, spend time with them. And not in anything structured, but sit down with them and just listen. It's my favorite thing to actually sit at an 826 or to sit with my nieces and to just have conversations about what's going on because they tend to be so weird and strange and wonderful, and so how we like to say volunteers at 826, we regularly hear people say to us, this is like no place else I've ever been. We had one volunteer in a film say that this is like being home or what I would like home to be like because you're there, I can come here and I can just have fun. I don't have to think about work. I don't have to think about my job. And the kids that I'm working with, they don't give a damn what I do for a living. To them, that moment that I'm spending that time with them, whether it be an hour, whether it be 2 hours or so, is the best time because so many of those kids don't have that opportunity to encounter adults for that amount of time, and especially adults that want to spend that amount of time with them. That's where that magic happens within 826. I want to leave you with a thought. One more thing is that if you are near an 826, if you have the opportunity, come visit. Come to the Pirate Supply Store. It literally is a supply store for supplies for the working buccaneer. So we sell eye patches. We sell peg legs, as she said. It is, when you walk in, you hear people regularly, we get languages, people from all over the world will walk into an 826. And you're sitting there and they're always looking like, what is happening here? I think that's the beauty of it. It's like, what is happening here? Because what's happening here, the storefront is great, but it's really the magic that's happening in the back. It's really the beauty of watching these relationships between this young people and the adults. That is really where this sort of, you want to know where the wild things are? It's in the back of an 826 center. Thank you very much.